Hello, and welcome to this series of podcasts on Gordie Gillespie, who many of us believe was the greatest coach of all time. I hope that these conversations with players and friends of Gordie will help illuminate Gordie's greatness. But more importantly, I hope we can learn how Gordie did it. He was the winningest collegiate baseball coach of all time and the greatest Illinois high school football coach of all time. But we're not interested in his secrets of winning games, but his secrets of winning the hearts, minds, and the development of his young athletes. Tom Kennedy had a unique and marvelous relationship with Gordie. Tom played basketball and baseball for Gordie in the late 50s and 60s, becoming an All-American basketball player and one of the best baseball players in Lewis history. Then Tom became a teacher and a coach. He ended up at Lewis coaching and working with Gordie. He then became vice president at Lewis. Then he moved to St. Francis with Gordie. Then he took a very innovative position at Regis University in Denver in adult education.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to these podcasts on conversations on Gordie. And it is my absolute dear, wonderful honor to have today a lifelong friend and mentor, Tom Kennedy. Tom played baseball and basketball for Gordie back in the late 50s and 60s. He was an All-American basketball player and had a tryout with the Chicago Bulls and was positively one of the best first basemen ever to play for Gordie. And he had a circuitous career. He started out as a coach and a teacher, both at Lewis, where he rose to be vice president, and then at St. Francis, always working closely with Gordie. And then he had a marvelous change of career, moved to Regis University in Denver and started an innovative program on adult education to spread throughout the country. And I know, Tom, that especially earlier in your career, intramurals were a wonderful place for you to affect in a very positive way the culture of a college, and you hold them dear. And I think that your introduction to Gordie might have something to do with intramurals. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, yes, that was part of it. And you're right about intramurals. I did play in the intramural. Let me back up a little bit. When I first came to Lewis as a student, I was a baseball player, and I was very lucky to be seen by Gordie one time, and he said, yeah, we'd be interested in having you come to Lewis as a baseball player. So that's what happened. It was a very small little scholarship, and I felt like I was the king of the hill. But it was a couple of my buddies and I from Joliet Catholic, where I'd gone to high school. We decided on a lark. It was probably about toward the end of October, they had tryouts for the basketball team. So we said, I never had a chance to play high school basketball because of travels back and forth from where I lived to Joliet Catholic, which was about 30 miles. I took a bus every day. So I didn't play basketball before, but I enjoyed playing basketball, in the backyard and with the neighbor kids and so on. So I think I played two intramural games at Joliet Catholic, and I found that I could score, minimally. Maybe I scored 6 points. I don't know, but it wasn't that difficult. If I got the ball, I shot it and it seemed to go in. So I went out for basketball with my buddies, and I got cut along with everybody else except for one guy, and that was Chuck Schwartz. He went through the tryouts and he made the basketball team. I got cut. That was no big deal to me because I knew I wasn't very good. And so it ended up that a couple of guys from Joliet said, hey, you're not that bad. Come on with us. We're going to play in Joliet Park District, Lockport Park District, CYO, and I was playing in intramurals also at Lewis. And lo and behold, I seemed to get better. And just it was a quirk that I think it was Pat. Um, what's Pat's last name?
At Callahan?
Pat Callahan. That's one of the problems of getting a little older. Pat Callahan saw me in intramurals and said, "Hey, he's pretty good." But still wouldn't have been on the team except for at the end of the semester, my freshman year, we had the basketball team had two players become ineligible, and I think they needed a body out there for practice, so that got recruited to play, to be on the team, which I thought was fabulous. So that really was my introduction to the basketball team and the first basketball coach I ever had, and it was my first real basketball experience with a coach. So that's how I got to know Gordie, and it started this whole thing.
Oh, wow. And so when you graduate from Lewis, what was your first job then?
Well, when I graduated from Lewis, the Christian Brothers had been expanding to other schools, high schools in the area. So it was Driscoll, Montini, and several schools that were started because they had brothers that could be there. And two other schools, Providence High School, which was all girls, they took over Providence High School, made it co-institutional. And then they also started a school in Aurora, Illinois, which was Roncalli High School. And so I ended up at Roncalli and coached basketball and baseball. I was the PE teacher, general business, English, history, intramurals there, of all things, again. And as I say, I taught English. That was my main job. But I also, in a Catholic school, we did everything, that was. And it was the first year of the school. So we started out, I was one of three people at the school as faculty.
Wow.
We had the principal, then two faculty members who were strictly faculty members and coaches. That was me and another Christian brother. So that was it. That was my first job.
And how did you get to Lewis then?
Well, I was at Roncalli for 4 years. Saw my first graduating class there, and it was a real solid 4 years. And I discovered the real power of intramurals, where you can take kids that never played the sport, and if they play the sport and have a little bit of success, that is the moon for them. And we experienced that, and it was a fabulous thing that we had started at Roncalli. And then I left Roncalli and went over to Providence for 1 year, and also was the assistant baseball coach for Gordie in the spring of that year. So I was 1 year at Providence. Then they were looking for a soccer. I coached soccer, by the way. That was another sport that I had never played, but somehow I managed to be okay.
Just like Gordie. Gordie became the greatest Illinois high school football coach.
Exactly.
Without ever having played a down of football.
Not one snap.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if he knew how to put on the uniform. I don't know.
Right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
So it was a chance to go to Lewis and work full time in the athletics department and start a soccer program. So he has confidence in me that I can start a soccer program after coaching soccer for probably 5 years on the high school level. And so he gave me the job, and I became that, plus intramural co-director with a fabulous guy, Paul Ruddy, and assistant baseball coach. So that's how I got started there.
That's great. Now you rose to be vice president at Lewis?
Well, I spent 5 years in the athletic department coaching with Gordie. Yeah. Which was a great experience to have, not only have him as my coach in two sports for 4 years at Lewis, and then to coach with him for another 5 years, road trips and downtime where you're going to a movie with Gordie and you're having dinner with Gordie. In the car with him all those times. So I was absorbed. With Gillespieism. That was it. And so it was in my final couple of years at Lewis as intramural director and a baseball coach. We had a lot of civil problems with social unrest, Take the years 70, 71, and then, well, it was actually 69, 70, 71, where things were really coming to a head. And we had a small group of my black students, and we had a large group of Southside white students that didn't seem like they wanted to get along. And that was my experience with, I was born and raised in Braidwood, Illinois, which had black families there, along with white families. And we lived side by side and played sports and so on with pickup games or whatever it is. So I thought that was really weird that the white kids couldn't get along with the black kids. The black kids couldn't, there's something in between there. So I had demonstrated, I guess, enough ability to get along with both sides and work through both sides and get to some kind in intramurals, basically. When you have the Black Student Union and Tau Kappa Epsilon or Phi Kappa Theta playing sports against each other, especially in contact sports like touch football, which is not always touch, softball, sliding into second base, hard slide, and basketball. You and I both know that basketball, there's no contact with that sport.
Oh, no. I used to rebound like this, not like that.
Yeah, I know. There's a term for that. We don't have to go into that. Something about your butt and your elbows.
Right.
But so I had shown that I could get along with people, and they needed somebody as a dean of students who had that ability, I guess. I'm kind of, they invited me to become dean of students. And I didn't know what the job would entail necessarily, but I got along with people. So, and that was something that I think Gordie helped me along with, that he was great with people. So therefore, he was able to understand them and listen. I mean, one of the greatest qualities that he had was listening. And listening is hard work, Ray, as you know. It's harder than talking. Listening, I would come out of meetings in subsequent years, and I would be exhausted by listening intently. And if I gave a presentation, it wasn't nearly as tiresome as the listening part was always real tough. But so I could listen to people. So I became a dean of students, and then a vice president for student services, university services. And I did that for, from 72 to 78. So there was another 5 years or so that I spent doing those kinds of things in administration. I learned the ropes of administration. Then after I left Lewis and went over to St. Francis for 8 years and did some other things that were somewhat related to student life, but also some innovative things that I was able to participate in. I learned a lot at St. Francis also. Every place I've gone, and it's another theme that with Gordie, always learn.
Yeah.
Learning never stops. And it could be, that was a driver that he had, and he demonstrated. It's the reason that you could go to a baseball clinic and we would give a demonstration, give all our secrets away. We'd even give signs away. And people thought, well, okay, we got Gordie now, all these things that he does. By the time they got that in action, he had come up with new stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, but that's what learning is all about. You're constantly learning. And so I was learning a lot at both Lewis and at St. Francis. And that's when after St. Francis, 8 years, then that's when I had a job offer to come out to Regis University in Denver. All right. I feel like I'm talking too much.
Oh, you raised three really fascinating issues that I'd like to follow up on. Number one is your communication skills that Lewis, at the time, the administration saw in this problem. And both our good friend Tony Delgado and our great mentor Tippy McFadden,
yeah, right.
Both of them have said to me individually, they said that if it weren't for Tom Kennedy during that racial issue at Lewis might have closed. They certainly would have been in a much worse position unless they had the initiative and the intelligence to hire Tom in that position. Number two, you must have learned some great communication skills. You probably came as a young man to Lewis, but you probably learned an awful lot from Gordie about that, just watching him. And the third thing is, if you combine those two ideas with what I quote you many, many times a year when I'm talking to all kinds of different groups and people, and the quote I use is Tom Kennedy was the first one to say to me that never a day goes by when I don't say to myself, what would Gordie do in this position? And here, maybe for the first really terrible time, important time, you had to be like Gordie.
Yeah, and those are very kind words, and I think there's a lot of exaggeration that my good friends Tony and Tiffy and some of the people said about me. I think I was a player because I knew the kids, and when you spend time, and that was because of intramurals. I knew the kids. I knew their nicknames. I knew we would. I would spend time in the gym, hours and hours a day, into the evening hours. And those evening hours, you sit on the sidelines, make sure everything's going well. And we had a great group of student leaders who would make sure the referees and the people keeping score. I mean, we had just a great team. And that was another thing too. It takes teamwork, and I was a part of that. I was probably one of the key parts to it, but I was only a part of it. It was a team. It was a team thing that we did in intramurals. But I got to know the kids, and I had confidence that if I'm going to talk to the white kids or the black kids, they would respect me because I respected them. Key, respect, and you never embarrass anybody. You respect them, and so I would try to learn from them what the issues were and why they were reacting the way they reacted to situations. And I was more knowledgeable about the South Side white kids, although they were different than the way I was raised. But the black kids, I had to do my homework on that, and I talked to a lot of the black kids about, okay, tell me more. Teach me to I need to understand what the issues are, and what your agenda, what you hope to get out of this, because they were angry. They were angry young men at an age 19 to 22, and I could see on the other side too, the white kids, they were angry young men also, and it was mostly men, although we had issues also with the blacks and whites among women. But I think when you respect people and they know that you can be trusted. Trust is, without respect, you don't get trust. So, and again, Gordie, I mean, he respected everybody. He respected everybody, his opponents also. And you didn't downgrade, you didn't embarrass anybody.
Never. Yep.
And that's,
wouldn't allow it.
that's obviously a fairly big problem in our country.
Absolutely.
For the last several years. Last 10 years, 15 years, I don't know. But the idea that you have to get to know people, to understand where they're coming from, and respect them, because through their eyes is different than what I see through my eyes on the situations. So I think that was a key in the communication, is listening and trying to understand, to help me understand. In so many words, you don't just walk up to people and say, help me understand this. You establish a relationship first. Without the relationship, you don't have anything. So, and in the relationship, it means that you become a credible person to the other person. And that's where Gordie comes in. It's a one-on-one. Most of these were one-on-one in the gym in the wee hours of the evening. That I learned a lot during that time. Again, back to your point way back when about intramurals. Intramurals, you get to know people, not just the athletes. You get the guys, and we had in intramurals. Yeah, we had the kind of elite division, the gold division. Then we had the silver division. They were pretty good, Then you got the bronze division. They had played maybe a little bit, and they were, but these were all guys that were trying to try. I think sports has a lot to offer to it. So many people, and then for a while, then we went into the lead division. We had a lead division where guys had never played. Games would be 6-4. It was like a grade school game without any
You never told me that.
Oh yeah, yeah, we're the lead division. So and that was another key point for the competition. The competition has to be even. You can't have a team load up on you. We had to have devices so that they could play against guys and girls who were equal, pretty much equal in their ability. So you had the guy that had the polio. He with the braces still on his legs. He stayed at one end of the court. I can remember exactly when he got the ball and he scored. It was like this was the peak sports experience that he would ever have. It was amazing. But he was an individual who had a situation. He would never play sports again, but he had a chance to do something for his team. The team was the important thing. It wasn't about him. It was about he got points for his fraternity or whatever organization that he was in. That is the key. So I feel like I'm really rambling now or preaching. I'm not sure
Not
which.
in the least. Not in the least.
But,
so what I got here
so,
is I want to follow up on these. I have 9 points.
Okay.
I want to bring them all together, almost like a chef who's got the ingredients. We're going to mix them. All right. So
Okay.
number one, you talk about that beautiful story. I mean, that brings tears to my eyes. And team. So we're talking about team and the student with polio. And the title of the book, I named it after one of my Gordie had so many maxims. They were just beautiful. You went through a few of them. Namely, you never cheer against the other team. I mean, that's a beautiful. I remember you emailed me and Sully and Tony and said, what are the 10 things that Gordie taught you? And that was going to be one of them. But the most to me, the close to me was coach the kid at the end of the bench. Gordie would say at his talks, if you make the experience within your coaching a great experience for that kid who's never going to get into the game, then you're going to reach everyone, as opposed to what is the normal way. All too many coaches, they coach to their prima donnas, their stars. And all right. So then you talk about team. Every person I've talked to who talks about Gordie Gillespie always talks about the team. How did he do that? How did he teach us to love the team? So you take that student who you talked about with polio, you had to convince the other players on both teams to say, look how cool it's going to be if we throw the ball to him and let him score a basket. You've got to have not only the team, but the opposite team. Like Tony would say all the time, if you play Gordie, he'll beat you. Now, if you switch players, he'll still beat you. So it's a great line. But if it was incredible what you did. And so let me just go real quickly through what you were talking about. You talked about respect. You have to respect kids. What's the first commandment? Gordie said, and again, next to coach the kid at the end of the bench, next to that, I think the thing he said the most was, you have to love kids. I remember in one talk, he said, if you don't love kids, now he's talking to 500 coaches. He said, if you don't love kids, get out. We don't want you. All right, so respect kids. You said listen and learn. Right? Gordie talked about that all the time. And Sully talks about, you probably know this, Sully talks about you go into the locker room, his football locker room at halftime. And the first thing he said was, all right, tell me what's going on. To lineman, why isn't this play working? Instead of ranting and raving, saying, why didn't we do this? All right. Then you said preparation. So to handle this very difficult problem, you said you had to go back and prepare before you went and talked to each side. Preparation, another one of Gordie's commandments. Then you said relationships. You had to develop these relationships. Well, that's what you do when you love kids. You talked about one-on-one. How about Gordie? Didn't he talk to you all the time? I thought I was the only one he talked to, but he was talking to you, Tony. So he was talking to everybody, whether it was
Yeah.
one of the stars, like the best first baseman ever to play at Lewis and in Stretch Kennedy, or the greatest shortstop ever, Tony Delgado, or the kid who didn't get into the bench very much. Look at Paul Babcock. They told him at the beginning of his senior year, you're not going to get to play. And he says, well, keep me on the team. And he turns out to be a star. So one-on-one you talked about. You blended all those things, and that's what I meant by you became Gordie. You took.
Yeah, and you expand that from why, you get back to what you're doing, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? What's the reason for doing, I think all religions, for instance, could be summed up in 4 words: be good and do good. That's it. But with Gordie, it was like, okay, what, do you love people? Do you love kids? I expand that, say, do you love people? Every supervisory position that I've been in, or director or leader, it's always that, you put together people and you respect one another and you listen to one another, and it becomes a one-on-one. You got to get to know. Abraham Lincoln had this great line. He says, I really don't like that guy. I gotta get to know him better.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's the key. You got to get to know one another, and and also, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about what we're doing to try to make the world better. That's kind of a big generalization, but how can I help this person be a better person? And so the humility of that, he never talked about himself. He was embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
By the way, I was embarrassed a little bit what you said about me, but I did kind of enjoy it. but humility. I said, because a lot of the things that have been said about me for good, I'd say that's an exaggeration. Now, some of the things they may say about me that I was bad, that I'd say that is definitely an exaggeration. But I think that's the number one. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's the selfish being unselfish, and that's a major problem that we have currently. But I think all the way through. Are you looking out for me? I'm looking out for me. The heck with everybody else, and that's not what we're supposed to be all about, I don't think. Every religion teaches that it's not just about you, I think.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Oh, I think it probably starts with that why am I doing what I do? And is it going to be about me? Can I make more money? I can have people praise me? Or is it because I feel like I can do a good job for others? And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
And the more good you do, it multiplies beautifully.
Oh, yeah.
I go back to you, and I'm going to try and put your unhumble hat on again. And so I show up at Lewis, and I was clearly, I always say I was the 13th man on that 12-man basketball team, because we go through our drills, and I'm a mathematician, and we'd go through our drills, and then we'd scrimmage 5-on-5. I was always one of the two sitting in the first few weeks. Now, I go back to how I got to Lewis, and that is I called Gordie because Frank Mariani, who was my summer baseball coach, said, where are you going to school? I said, I don't know. And he says, well, call Gordie Gillespie. I said, why? He said, well, he's coach at Lewis. What's Lewis? So anyway, I called Gordie. Cut the story short, Gordie invites me down to play 2-on-2 with 3 other guys he was going to give a scholarship to. And you were with him because you were the captain. Right? And as I remember, you convinced Gordie, because we knew Barekas and Herbie Hayes were going to get scholarships.
Yeah, right.
They were tremendous. Yeah. So it was me against this other guy. And I knew that within about 5 minutes of playing the 2-on-2. I think it's illegal now to do something like this. But I think we played for an hour and a half. We were dead tired. And I think you and Gordie talked, and Gordie wanted to give it to the full third scholarship to the other guy, which he was going to do until I give him a call, because of lovely Frank Mariani gave me the clue. And why Gordie had 3 scholarships in July, I have no idea. But anyway, he did. And so when I show up at Lewis, I don't know anybody. Turns out that I had played in the All-Star game with Tony. And so I said, are you the shortstop from that game? And he said, you're the catcher. So we became friends immediately. Otherwise, I knew virtually no one. We start basketball practice, and you took me under your wing. I backed you up very, very poorly, but we became incredible friends the rest of our lives.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
This is one way how Gordie taught team. It's such a, how in the world can someone teach you to be a great team, namely to love each other? So not only did Gordie love his players, he taught us to love each other. And that's what you're saying. Be good and do good.
You said it better than I did, but I think that's it. He taught us and to be loyal to one another, and also to be and I get reminded by my friends. I think of Pat Sullivan. He's corrected me many times. Tom, I don't think that was the best way to do something. You know, to whatever. You embarrassed that guy. Pat was right. I worked with some great people. I'm going dim here. Is there a reason? Oh, no, I guess not. I've worked with some great people at Lewis. I mean, the students that I worked with were some great people. The John Morris, the Jack Shamanskis, the Frank Palmasanis. These were, I mean, I hate to mention only three because they popped in my head, but they were great people. When I worked in student affairs, I still didn't get the black thing and the issues that were going on in society. Kathleen Bolden and Charles Kennedy were two people who were very instrumental, both African Americans. They had enough faith in me that I was coming at it the right way. They would say something to me if I said something inappropriate. Thank God they did. I remember interviewing a black candidate for a job, and I made the statement, Ray, this guy's very sharp. He's very articulate. And Charles Kennedy looked at me and says, Tom, what you just said, he's articulate because he talks like a white guy. And I said, yeah, you're right. You're right. I got my lessons over and over again by people that were different from me. That's a key to me, anyhow, that I've learned from people who are not like me, more so than I ever learned from people who are like me. And I think Gordie was great on that. Gordie was also interested in learning more about the other person. Now, I mean, I'm sure he had his issues. He was human, but I just thought that I need to learn from people who are not quite like me. They see things in a different way, but that's where Gordie comes in, one-on-one listening.
Listening. Oh, absolutely.
Don't lecture, ask questions, look them in the eye. That's it. And people say Gordie's got a great memory. How did he learn about the memory? Because he listens to the person when they say their name, and he's got it there because he's listening, and the focus is completely on that other person. That's, I mean, now again, I feel like I've gone off on a tangent here, but it's all gets back to the team and how you work with one another. And by the way, that tryout that we had when you showed up, it was in Lockport. It was it was at a Catholic grade school. It might not, I'm pretty sure it was a Catholic grade school. There was one basket, as I recollect, and it was on blacktop. The temperature was probably about 98. The humidity was another 100%. And you guys were out there sweating, and probably we said, just take, I probably said, Gordie, just take any of these guys. I don't really care. I want to get out of here. But anyhow, I'm sure it wasn't quite like that, but I do remember the blacktop, and I do remember it was very hot. And I remember you being there, and Bill Barekas and Herbie Hayes, and I can't remember anybody else that was there at that time. But
what's really fascinating also now, when you bring that up, is that I started out in basketball as the kid at the end of the bench. I was literally the kid sitting over when we started. Now, my brother, who was 10 years older than me and my hero, kept saying, listen to the coach, and he's going to give you clues as to what you've got to do. He said, first of all, Ray, you're the best shooter on the team. I said, no, we got this guy Kennedy. He never misses. Other than Kennedy, maybe I could shoot. But I had these catcher's legs, and I couldn't jump, etc. But Gordie kept after and kept watching, and he coached the team.
Yeah.
So you were the captain, and you embraced this, and you embraced this little dumb guy who was sitting down all the time during the scrimmages. But you taught me, and you tried to teach me that one great move that you had. I could never forget it. You'd catch the ball on the sideline, and you'd fake going with your left foot. And if the guy went with you, then you'd go up and shoot your jump shot. If he didn't go with you, you'd go right around him. And
by the way, I got to say, that was the beauty of my inexperience, because I didn't know. Well, I didn't have to unlearn too much. Gordie said, "Here's how you do it. You jab with your left. Don't bring your foot back. Just go up with the shot." And that was page one. He would call that's page one. Page two was jab, fake, extend the left foot, and drive one dribble to the basket. That was page two. And those little fundamentals, because I could shoot off the left foot, with the jab step without bringing the foot back. And that was a great time advantage, because a fraction of a second you lose, otherwise. So that was there was some merits to not having played before, I guess. But
well, anyhow, you went an awfully long way to never having played to becoming an All-American. Tell us the story about, and this is another thing about building team. And I remember I told you about Joe Claus many years ago.
Yeah.
And Joe got a walk-off hit to win a World Series game. And the next day for breakfast, he walked in, and he says, as usual, I walk in before everybody else is there. And I walk in, and as everybody sees me, Gordie stood up and started clapping. And the whole team rose. And Joe says, I didn't know what they were clapping. And all of a sudden I realized it was for me. But then I realized it really wasn't for me. It was about the team clapping for themselves. So look what Gordie taught Joe, that even if you get that hit, that's fine. But remember, this is a team, and it's not. And so tell us about how you learned that you were named All-American.
Well, that's funny you ask, because I'm thinking about it now. I think I walked into the cafeteria and Gordie said, congratulations, and something I'm thinking, I don't know what he's talking about. He says, you made small college Catholic All-American. I said, oh, that's cool. What is that? How many schools? Were 4 schools involved or what? But he gave the clap.
Stood up and started clapping.
Oh yeah, he did exactly. And I just now thought of that's exactly what he did. I had no idea about it.
But he went out of his way.
Oh yeah.
Build everybody up whenever.
Well, yeah, exactly. He would. He did things. I mean, Kenny Nelson tells me the story about when he pitched the one year at Lewis. I was already graduated. You were on that team when. And he had the great curveball, and Gordie wanted to get him signed, and he was talking to the scouts, and Kenny was way behind, quite a ways behind. We could hear Gordie talking to the scout. And did you see that curveball that Kenny Nelson threw today? Unbelievable. I mean, he talked loud enough so Kenny could hear it, I think.
Yeah.
But he was making a point with the scout that this guy has something that you guys should be taking a look at. So he was always doing things for us, and in any way possible. He made the statement many times. He said, when you Tom struck out, I struck out. When you got a base hit, I got a base hit. He was empathizing with everything that we did. Empathy is the other thing that he got into. He felt for you. He also felt for an embarrassment situation when one of the nicknames, we were famous for nicknames, And one nickname that was maybe a little denigrating, and with one of the players, Gordie says, I just don't think that's a good nickname for him. And so he had thought about it. He says, I just don't know if that's a good one. So we stopped using that nickname. But he was always empathizing with the other person. He didn't want to, he had respect for others, but he never wanted to embarrass or have any of us embarrassed. The one time I've seen him angry and almost threw a ball at a runner was when I was playing first base and a guy stepped on my foot, on my Achilles, right next to my Achilles. And it was intentional. I mean, anybody running first base, so Gordie came screaming out of the dugout and he says, the next time somebody does that to you, you take that ball and you throw it at his head. That was the loudest and the most disrespectful, but that guy probably will never step on anybody's foot at first base again. But it took that. But there were times when he did get emotional. He was one to suppress emotions by and large, but there were times when he also expressed emotions at an appropriate time, especially in the defense of one of his players. We were his players, his guys. So don't disrespect my guys.
Well, and the way he would get everybody moving towards, and his attention to detail. So I remember you just said that in that problem at Lewis, you had to go and learn, and you look for small details and how you were going to talk to each side and things like that. And between you and me, one of the greatest small details of all time. I know I shouldn't say this because we've been talking almost an hour now, and this would take us a couple hours. But one of the greatest, we were talking, he and I were having lunch with Joan, and I mentioned, well, can you think of, because he mentioned it, he says, I was constantly thinking about, what else can I do to improve, whatever sport it was that he was coaching, basketball, football, baseball. And I said, can you think of one small detail, give me an example. And he burst out laughing. He says, well, back in 1962, I had a center fielder who pitched in high school and he didn't want to pitch in college. And I don't know where he's going because I didn't picture the 62 team. I said, yeah. And he says, yeah, we made the national tournament, the World Series, and we had about 5 or 6 days where we were practicing at Lewis before we went. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I said, Bob Bachman, we don't have any left-handed pitchers. So the next day of practice, I took you, Ray, and I said, now you caught Bob during the summer, didn't you, for about 4 or 5 years? I said, yeah. He says, why don't you and the two of you warm up? Maybe I need to get a left-handed batter out. So he even remembered that. And so what did he do? He tells Bachman he's going to pitch against the number 1 seeded team, Sam Houston State, who had 7 or 8 left-handed batters.
Yeah.
Bob hadn't pitched in 2 years. And he pitched, of course, a masterpiece, which is, by the way, that's chapter 1 of my book. And I chronicle that. But what I try to do through the book, Tom, is try and show the brilliance of the man. And that's one of them. Just constantly thinking, what else can I do? Rather than sitting back and saying, you just talked about, you're never done, right? You're constantly learning. And that's one of the things he taught me. And he taught you. And he taught over 2,400 guys. Just absolutely.
Well, I think he's probably taught a lot more than that because he taught my kids. Because I told my kids, and I've written a lot about Gordie, and one of the baseball games that when my son Bob was coaching this high school in Colorado, and they had a game at Mile High State. It wasn't Mile High. It was at Coors Field, and his team was playing, and he had a pick. It was after Gordie had passed away, but I had the card, and I gave all my kids the card about Gordie Gillespie died, and so such and such a date. So, and he's tossed, the one with Gordie tossing a baseball up in the air.
Yeah.
And so my son Bob made sure he had a picture of somebody took his picture while he's holding the picture of Gordie on the baseball field, because that was his. Bob really didn't know Gordie other than through the guys, you guys. that's how he learned about Gordie Gillespie and all the things that Gordie stood for. And Bob tried to emulate Gordie as best as he could, as he understood Gordie. So when you say he taught 1,500 guys, he's taught probably hundreds of thousands of guys and women also.
Oh yeah.
So just by in classes that he taught. Think about, we talk about this a lot. I know.
Always taught, yes.
Yeah, it's just amazing the things that he did for us. It's he also taught me about taking care of the field, taking care of your surroundings. Be self-respectful about, I said, leave the locker room cleaner than when you found it, when you got here. Clean out the dugout before you leave.
Right.
And I think of that in terms of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
We want to leave for our grandkids, we want to leave the earth in the best shape possible, which we haven't done a very good job of. That's another story. But it's something that we need to respect, not only ourselves and others, but we also living things and also our environments. So I think of that and extrapolate from that a lot of other ideas that for me worked really well. And I know we're coming probably pretty close to the time. Lest us not forget, one of the great things about Gordie Gillespie was sense of humor. Able to he never took himself so seriously. Gordie Gillespie, you got the most wins in college baseball ever. Yeah, I also got the most losses than any college baseball coach ever. So he would always he said, yeah, he looked like Ted Williams with polio. His arms are a little skinny. He would do things that were just funny, and he had a great sense of humor. And I think, my dad had a great sense of humor. So many things I learned from my dad, but Gordie comes in number 2, by the way, as the most significant person for me. But the sense of humor that you don't take yourself too seriously, because we screw up a lot, and you got to laugh at yourself. But he could find situations that he just thought that were just hilarious. So he didn't ever get so serious. He was Mr. Serious all the time.
I can remember him at a couple of talks I heard him, and he would say, "Coach, look, your players have to learn how to overcome fear of failure. Fear of failure. They're coach. What are they afraid of? They're not afraid of physical pain. They'll run through the wall for you.
Yeah,
but they're afraid of being embarrassed. And they're afraid of making a mistake." He says, "No, suppose the bases are loaded. You're down by 1 and there's 2 outs in the 9th inning and you're up. You ever been there, coach?" And he goes up to the coach in the beginning. "You ever been there?" The coach goes, "Yeah. How about you?" To the next guy, he says, Yeah. And suppose you were 0 for 4 and you're up there with 2 outs. He says, "Hey, heck, once I was 0 for Georgia."
Yeah.
And he goes on. I remember that. We talked, we were selling his baseball vest and all afterwards with Tony and all. And so a couple of days later, I was calling him about something else. I said, "Gordie, that was one of the funniest lines I've ever heard. Once I was 0 for Georgia." He says, "I was." It was his first month in the minor leagues that he spent in Georgia. He said, "I didn't have a hit for a month."
Yeah. I do remember him telling me that when he was in the on-deck circle and had been 0 for 22. And he says, my mind was going on, I got to get a hit. The pressure's on. And, but he would say, "Yeah, I've been there." And I think that's another part of the communication and understanding is that you when you talk about your own self-failings, you make yourself vulnerable to the other person.
Right.
And that gets respect. They say, okay, when you're talking to one of your kids and you say, now at this age, they're older, and you say, I made the same mistake that I think you're making right now, whatever. You say, I'm not literally pure about everything. I didn't do everything right. I acknowledge that in front of you. I make myself vulnerable, and what can we learn together? How can we do this better now? And I think that's one of the keys. Again, it was Gordie Gillespie. Do I think about the Gordie Gillespie every day? You damn right. On some days, more than once a day. Where I say, okay, how would how would Gordie approach this one? So he's been amazing. He's been the most significant person outside my own parents. I would never be in the situation I'm in right now. I don't know what I've been doing. That was not my career goal, but it did turn out to be what I was meant to do. And it was because of Gordie Gillespie.
Well,
So
just
I'm
as
there.
you say that, Tom, I'm thinking of 10, 20, 30 just incidents when Gordie would say something to me. And you and I, at young ages, we realized that somehow, I don't think I could have put it in words, but I remember Tony and I rushing to the car on a trip, rushing to the coach's car. And the other guys are rushing back to the van because they wanted to be together. And he and I wanted to be with Gordie. And you were the same way.
Yeah.
You know, we take these trips, him and Ruddy in the front seat. Oh, geez. And would we laugh?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, those were times that made who we are.
Yes.
That's who we are right now.
And that's what I'm trying to do with these podcasts. I'm trying to reach not just coaches, but that's the immediate audience. But I think even more than that, if you pay attention to what Gordie was saying in that speech, in his 10 commandments, they really make sense, and you can apply them as you did in a horrendous situation at Lewis. You took a lot of those ideas in these 10 commandments and you applied them as I went through. I think I read off 8 or 9 things that you said that you had to do in this really tough situation. And you pulled it off.
Right.
You became like Gordie.
Well, when you played for Gordie, and in my case, I coached with Gordie, you couldn't help it but be a sponge, and just it absorbed every pore in your body. And then without even realizing the learning that was taking place, it took place because you became, to a small degree, you became in certain instances, you become Gordie Gillespie. Now that's an exaggeration for the most part. I mean, but there's enough of it that Gordie became me that I didn't have to think about it. I mean, I would think about Gordie, every day and so on, but I think more so I would think about what he had taught me and how he became me. So he coached that way. He became the team. He became the driver. They say NASCAR drivers, the driver and the car become one. Mm-hmm. I think Gordie and the team became one. We were that close.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yes.
Well, and I think each one of us individually, to a certain degree, we became
in the team.
Gillespie.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. That's a great image.
Well, we should probably end on that note because that may be the only good image in the whole presentation here.
Oh no, that's a beautiful one. Yeah, that he somehow got us all together this way, and we remain thinking that way. I mean, look at the friends we've made for life, and I only knew you for a few months back in college, and yet you became my mentor. And not only do I think of Tom Kennedy all the time, and I do, but
well,
I think of Gordie.
There were several things that I hope you didn't take seriously from me. Because we were pretty. A couple of them,
but we're not going to talk about that. I remember, Tom, the first time when you said that to me, that was only after we had graduated about 20 years or so. So we're around 50. I remember you saying that. Not a day goes by, right, when they don't fulfill what Gordie would do. The first time I did that, I was 21 years old. I chronicle in the book, and I had a dear friend who was in my class at Loyola. So I'm a graduate student, and I'm teaching algebra, and he was a boyhood friend of mine. And he shows up in my class and he gets an F. Now, we studied together 3-4 times a week. He'd come to my office and he desperately worked and worked and worked. And he knew the material. He knew algebra, but he let the little symbols on a piece of paper get to him during an exam. Now, he played basketball at John Carroll in front of thousands of people, but some little math things would boggle his mind. So I went to give him a D. And I remember saying, what would Gordie do here? What good would it do for me to give him a D when he knows the material. If he messed up and didn't study,
Yeah.
and then there would be no problem. But he really worked his. I didn't know that his father was on his deathbed. He didn't tell me this till years later, and he had flunked out of John Carroll. And his father begged him to go back. He says, "I can't pass math," and I gave him a B. And the two of us have been dear friends ever since. He didn't tell me that whole story till about 40 years later.
Yeah,
And
right.
I remember when you said that, 20 years after we graduated, I went back 20 years. And as soon as you said that, I said, wow, I became like Gordie. Gordie would have seen the whole picture. So I chronicle the whole thing in the book. And I think it's a beautiful story as to how we can pass on what Gordie has given us. And you are the absolute poster child of doing that, because your life has been like Gordie, and you've passed on what he has taught you in beautiful ways to all kinds of people. Just that beautiful story you just told about your son Bob.
Yeah. Well, I think you try to do the best, and sometimes you fail, but then you keep on going. That's another thing he taught us. You keep on going. There are so many things that we could talk probably and
that's how
write about.
We can talk for days.
Oh, it's amazing what he's done.
I tell you what.
Conversely, if we had not had a Gordie Gillespie, I mean, we wouldn't be as, no, this is going to pat ourselves on the back, but I think we're good people because a lot has to do because Gordie influenced us. I think we had the potential. I had the potential. I say myself, I had the potential to do some bad things, I'm sure, but or things that weren't nearly as productive as I was able to do had I not had Gordie as my mentor, my teacher.
One of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life, and he asked the question, what would the world be like if I were born? And whenever I watch that movie, Tom, I think of what you just said. I said, what would my life be like without Gordie Gillespie, without Frank Mariani saying, where are you going to school in July after I graduate from high school? Where are you going? And calling Gordie, and our lives have been blessed.
Yeah. No, beautiful man, beautiful human being.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Well, I think I prepared for a few ideas, and I think we covered them all. I got my list down because I had 10 things I learned from Gordie Gillespie. I've gotten it down to about 6, and we covered all of them.
Tell you what, next time we do this, why don't we start with when you emailed Tony and Sully and me, and you said, what are the 10 things? Why don't we go over that next time? And that would really be fun. What are the things that Gordie has taught you? In fact, that's going to be a question that I might ask in future vodcasts to say, what are the things that Gordie taught you that you have passed on? So let's end it there. And boy, I can't thank you enough, Tom.
Thank you
all
for
the
inviting
people
me.
in my life. I love talking to you as much as anyone. All right, so thanks very much.
Well, it's been great.
Okay.
Thanks, Ray.
Right,
Thank you so much.